The first thing I noticed was the smell, or rather, the lack of it. Every year, from the 1st of December on, my house smells like pine needles and cinnamon. It's a scent I cultivate, a signal that Christmas has arrived in the Jensen home. But when I walked in from my grocery run, all I smelled was lemon-scented floor cleaner and the cold, sterile scent of nothing. My house was naked. For 15 years, my husband Brian and I have hosted his family's Christmas. I'm Remy, by the way. I'm 39, and for most of my adult life, Christmas has been my thing. Not just a holiday, but a sacred tradition. A living museum of our family's history, all curated by me. But the living room was bare. The corner where our 9-foot tree always stood was empty. A faint circle of ghost scratches on the hardwood floor, the only evidence it was ever there. The mantelpiece, usually groaning under the weight of fresh garland and the stockings I sewed myself, was a blank slab of white-painted wood. The boxes I'd spent all weekend bringing down from the attic were gone. All of them. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. I walked through the downstairs in a daze, my grocery bag still hanging from my wrist. Every surface was wiped clean. The little ceramic village my son, Lance, helped me set up every year? Gone. The ridiculous glitter-bombed angel my daughter Sophia made in kindergarten that we always put on the entryway table vanished. My breath caught in my throat when I realized the star was gone. It was a clumsy, hand-carved thing my grandfather made from a piece of wood from his old barn before he passed away. It was splintery and imperfect and the most precious thing I owned. Panic began to bubble up, hot and acidic. Had we been robbed? But the TV was still there. The laptops were on the counter. No, this wasn't a robbery. This was an invasion. On the kitchen island, propped against the fruit bowl, was a single folded piece of notepaper. The handwriting was my mother-in-law, Deborah's familiar loopy cursive. Remy, it read. Gianna needed some help getting set up in her new house. We thought it would be best if she hosted this year. I took the decorations to get her started. See you on the 25th. I read it 3 times. There was no apology, no explanation, just a statement of fact, as if she'd borrowed a cup of sugar. She took my grandfather's star, she took my daughter's angel, she took 15 years of our memories and handed them to my sister-in-law Gianna like a party favor. The front door opened and Brian walked in, whistling. He was 41, 2 years my senior, and had a talent for remaining blissfully unaware of any tension until it was screaming in his face. He stopped short when he saw my expression. Whoa, what's wrong? He asked, dropping his briefcase. I just held up the note. He scanned it, his face unreadable. Oh, right, he said, shrugging off his coat. Mom mentioned they might do that. Gianna's new place is huge, it'll look great. The floor seemed to tilt under my feet. They might do that? Brian, they came into our house and took everything, without asking. They didn't need to ask, Remy. It's just family helping family, he said, heading for the fridge. Mom said Gianna was feeling overwhelmed. This helps her out. Helps her out? My voice was dangerously quiet. She took my grandfather's star, Brian. He sighed, the sound of a man bracing for a fight he couldn't be bothered to have. Don't be dramatic, it's just stuff. We can get new stuff. That's when something inside me broke. The shock, the violation, the casual dismissal from my own husband, it all coalesced into a single sharp point of pain. I felt a sob clawing its way up my throat, hot and ragged. For a second, I almost let it out. I almost gave them the satisfaction of the hysterical, emotional wife they so clearly expected me to be. They want me to cry. They want me to call Gianna, begging for my children's handmade ornaments back. Let them. Let them wonder what happens when I don't. The sob died in my chest, replaced by an unnerving, icy calm. I turned away from Brian, leaving him standing by the open refrigerator. I walked past the empty living room, down the hall, and into my small craft room. It was the one room they hadn't touched. I sat down at my desk, pulled my laptop toward me, and opened my email. My fingers flew across the keyboard, the clicking sounds echoing in the silent house. A new message. To the entire Jensen family. Subject, this year's Christmas update. I didn't scream or accuse, I simply stated the facts. The email was a masterpiece of cold, hard truth. Dear family, I began. I came home this afternoon to find my house has been emptied of all our Christmas decorations. A note from Deborah informed me they were taken to Gianna's new home to help her out. To be clear, this was done without my knowledge or consent. Among the items taken were the hand-sewn stockings for my children, every ornament Lance and Sophia have ever made, and the wooden star my grandfather carved for me before he died. I paused, my fingers hovering over the keys. I attached a single photo to the email, one I'd taken last Christmas of Sophia, then 8 years old, carefully placing her glitter-bombed kindergarten angel on the entryway table. Her face was pure joy. For 15 years, it has been my privilege to host our family Christmas. Since the role of host, along with my family's most cherished possessions, has been given to Gianna, I want to be clear. Brian, the children, and I will not be attending Christmas at her home this year. We will be making our own arrangements. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday. I signed it, Sincerely, Remy, and hit send before I could second-guess myself. The silence in the house lasted for exactly 93 seconds. Then my phone, sitting on the desk beside me, began to vibrate. It didn't stop. A cascade of replies flooded the family group chat. Brian's Aunt Carol was first. Deborah was just trying to help. Gianna has that big new house. It's a lot of pressure. A distant cousin. Wait, they took your stuff without asking? Then Brian stormed into the room, his face red. What the hell did you do? My mother just called me, hysterical. You sent an email? I sent a clarification, I said, my voice level. I refused to let him see me shake. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. You've embarrassed my mother and my sister. They embarrassed themselves when they entered my home and stole from my children, I shot back. Before he could answer, the doorbell rang. It was my best friend, Amy. She stood on the porch holding a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses, her expression grim. I got the email. I broke the speed limit. She pushed past Brian without a word and wrapped me in a hug. Tell me everything, she whispered, setting the wine down on the counter with a thud. While I recounted the story, Brian paced in the background, muttering about how I was making things difficult. Amy just stared at him. Are you serious right now, Brian? Your wife's family heirlooms were stolen by your mother, and you're worried about things being difficult? He just shook his head and retreated upstairs, unwilling to face 2 of us. He's always been like this, I said, sinking onto a kitchen stool. He lets his mom and sister walk all over him, and by extension, me. Not anymore, Amy said, pouring 2 generous glasses of wine. So what's the plan? Because making our own arrangements sounds deliciously vague and full of potential. A bitter laugh escaped me. I don't have a plan. I just know I can't sit at Gianna's table and watch her show off my grandfather's star on her tree. My eyes welled up. Do you remember that Christmas 10 years ago, when Douglas had his heart scare? Amy nodded, her eyes softening. I remember. Deborah was a wreck, and Gianna locked herself in her room crying about how Christmas was ruined. And I cooked the entire dinner for 20 people, wrapped every last gift, and drove back and forth from the hospital so Brian could be with his dad, I said, the memory still sharp. Lance was only 3, and I was pregnant with Sophia. I held this family together with tape and sheer force of will. I saved their Christmas. And this is how they thank me. So we'll show them what Christmas is like without you, Amy said, her eyes gleaming. We won't just make our own arrangements. We'll host our own Christmas. A better one. The real one. The idea was insane. It was perfect. A small, defiant smile touched my lips for the first time all day. Just then, my laptop pinged with a new email notification. It wasn't part of the family reply all chain. It was a direct message from Gianna. My stomach twisted as I opened it. The message was short, devoid of any greeting or warmth. I can't believe you sent that email. Mom was just trying to make things easier for everyone, but I guess that doesn't matter. You'll always find a way to make things about you. You'll always find a way to make things about you. I stared at Gianna's words on the screen, a bitter laugh bubbling in my chest. She had no idea how right she was. Fine. If they thought I wanted to make things about me, I would. I'd make this Christmas entirely, unapologetically about me, my children, and the life I had built. Okay, Operation Reclamation Christmas is a go, Amy announced 2 days later from my living room floor. She was surrounded by stacks of elegant cream-colored cardstock and a calligraphy pen she'd insisted on buying. Gianna is going for big, flashy, and stolen. We go for small, intimate, and authentic. Brian was making himself scarce, leaving for work early and coming home late, offering clipped, one-word answers to any questions. He was hoping if he ignored the problem long enough, it would simply vanish. He didn't understand that I was the problem now. The invitations can't be digital, I said, sorting through a list of names. No group texts, no emails. They have to be hand-delivered or passed through friends. It creates a sense of conspiracy, Amy grinned. I love it. Who's on the A-list for this rebellion? We made our list carefully. Not just my friends, but Brian's younger cousins who always felt bulldozed by Deborah. His uncle who'd once quietly told me my pot roast was better than his wife's. People on the periphery, the ones who saw the family dynamics for what they were, but never had the leverage to say anything. The food, though, was a problem. I couldn't cook for 30 people and host at the same time. My mind kept circling back to one person. The one person I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. My sister, Tatum. Tatum is 4 years older than me, a professionally trained chef who runs a successful catering business in the next town over. We'd had a falling out after our mother died, a stupid, painful fight over a piece of furniture that was never really about the furniture. Pride had kept us apart ever since. My hand trembled as I found her number in my contacts. She answered on the second ring. Hello? Her voice was the same, brisk, no nonsense. Tatum, it's Remy. Silence. For a long moment, I thought she'd hung up. Remy, she finally said, her tone flat. It's been a while. I know, listen, I need a favor, a professional one. I'm willing to pay full price, of course. I explained the situation in clipped, emotionless sentences. The decorations, the note, Gianna's email. I left out the part about how much it hurt, focusing only on the logistics. Another long pause. So let me get this straight, she said, and I could hear the faint hint of a smile in her voice. Your monster-in-law stole your Christmas, and now you want to burn hers to the ground with a rival party? Something like that, I admitted, my cheeks flushing. And you want my food to be your weapon of mass destruction? You make a mean beef Wellington. She laughed, a real throaty laugh that I hadn't heard in years. All right, little sister, I'm in. Send me the date and the head count. This sounds like my kind of petty. Hanging up, I felt a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled my knees. Later that night, I scrolled through social media, a morbid curiosity pulling me to Gianna's page. It was even worse than I'd imagined. She'd posted a dozen photos. There was my grandfather's star, perched atop a tree that was far too pristine. There were Lance's lopsided clay ornaments, hanging awkwardly next to perfectly coordinated glass baubles. There was a selfie of her and Deborah, smiling, with a caption that read, "So excited to finally host Christmas in our new home. Making new traditions is so important. So blessed to have my mom's help in making everything perfect." Family first. Hostess with the mostess. New beginnings. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. Making new traditions. They weren't just borrowing my things, they were erasing me. I shut my phone off, needing to focus on my own plan. I wanted to incorporate some of our old photos, maybe create a slideshow of Christmases past. I went to the old desktop computer in the craft room, the one that held 15 years of our digital lives. I started digging through folders of holiday pictures, looking for the best shots of the kids with their grandparents, of our family when it still felt whole. As I clicked through nested folders of backups from an old hard drive, my mouse hovered over a strangely named directory I didn't recognize. It was in a folder from 2019, a year before Gianna even started building her new house. The label was simple, almost clinical. GJ, Plans, 2019. Probably one of Brian's work things, I thought. GJ could be a client, but something made me click on it. The folder was password protected, odd. On a hunch, I typed in the name of Gianna's childhood dog. Access granted. The folder opened and my blood ran cold. The folder contained a handful of documents, saved emails, a Word document of notes, and a spreadsheet. It was a meticulously crafted multi-year plan. Gianna's plan. To take over Christmas. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision Deborah made to help her overwhelmed daughter. This was a long con. The emails exchanged between Gianna and Deborah 3 years ago were chilling. "Mom, we have to start laying the groundwork now," Gianna had written in one. "Remy has everyone thinking she's the perfect hostess. We need to gently point out the cracks. How she's always so tired. How the kids are getting a bit old for all the cutesy homemade stuff." Deborah's replies were just as venomous, cloaked in concern. "You're right, dear. She does try too hard. It's almost desperate. We'll just start suggesting that maybe it's becoming too much for her. For her own good, of course." There were notes detailing a timeline. Year 1. Plant seeds of doubt about my stress levels. Year 2. Suggest a potluck to lighten Remy's load, thereby diminishing her role. Year 3. The takeover. It was all there, a blueprint for my own obsolescence. My hands were shaking. I felt sick. This wasn't just about decorations. This was a calculated campaign to undermine and replace me at the center of the family I had poured my heart into. Then I saw another email chain, one that made the air leave my lungs. It was from 6 months ago. Brian had forwarded our joint bank statements and investment portfolio summary to his mother and Gianna. I remembered the conversation vividly. I had told him explicitly not to. We were applying for a home equity line of credit for some renovations, and Deborah had been nosy, asking about our finances under the guise of offering advice. "It's our private information, Brian," I'd said. "They're my family, Remy. We don't have secrets," he'd replied dismissively. He'd done it anyway. He'd sent our private financial life to the 2 women who were actively plotting against me. The betrayal was so profound, it was almost silent. It wasn't a loud, dramatic explosion, but a quiet, structural collapse of the trust I thought we had. The next morning, while Brian was in the shower, I logged into our online banking. With a few clicks, I transferred half of our joint savings, my half, the money I had brought into this marriage from the sale of my grandfather's house, into a new, separate account under my name only. It wasn't revenge, it was survival. Later that day, Amy came over, a file folder in her hand and a look of grim satisfaction on her face. She'd been doing some digging of her own, calling a few of the more gossipy cousins. "You are not going to believe this," she said, spreading some printed-out social media comments on the table. "Remember your famous gingerbread recipe? The one from your grandmother?" I nodded. "Well, apparently, for the last 5 years, Gianna has been telling people that you stole it from a magazine and are just passing it off as a family recipe. She told cousin Sarah that you were desperate to seem authentic. It was all part of the plan. Every little jab, every passive-aggressive comment, it was all groundwork. They'd been chipping away at my foundation for years, and I'd been too busy trying to hold everything together to even notice. But the final blow, the one that shattered everything, came from a single overlooked detail in Gianna's meticulous notes. A short entry under the heading, Logistics, Final Phase. It read, "Talk to B about getting a key. He can help move boxes while R is at her weekly grocery run. Tuesday AM is best." B. Brian. He hadn't just known about it. He hadn't just been complicit. He had helped them. He had used his key to let his mother and sister into our home. He had watched them pack up our children's memories. He had probably helped carry the boxes to their car. That night when Brian came home, he didn't find me waiting with a hot meal. He found me on the couch, laptop open, scrolling through Amazon. "Hey," he said, dropping his keys on the counter. "What's for dinner?" "I'm not sure what you're having," I said without looking up at him. "But I'm ordering pizza for me and the kids." He frowned, sensing the shift in the air. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, finally meeting his gaze, my own eyes cold and empty, "that you're no longer authorized to make purchases on this account." I clicked the mouse. A notification popped up on the screen. "You have successfully removed Brian Jensen from your Amazon Prime household." His face went from confused to angry. "Remy, what the hell is this? It's just an Amazon account." "No, Brian," I said, standing up. "It's not just an Amazon account. It's a household, and you broke the terms of service." The week before Christmas became a silent war. Brian started sleeping in the guest room. We moved around each other like ghosts in our own home, the space between us charged with everything unsaid. He didn't dare ask about the Amazon account again. He knew I knew. He just didn't know how much. Meanwhile, my reclamation Christmas was gaining a life of its own. The handwritten invitations had worked their magic. RSVPs were trickling in, not through texts, but through quiet phone calls and whispered confirmations at the grocery store. Brian's younger cousins confirmed they'd be there. My neighbor, who had always admired my decorations, asked if she could bring her famous mulled wine. It was becoming less of a party and more of a quiet rebellion. Tatum was my secret weapon. She'd taken to her role with a kind of savage glee I hadn't seen since we were teenagers. She wasn't just catering, she was co-conspiring. "I have a surprise for you," she said over the phone one afternoon. "Do you remember Gianna's husband, Jose?" I vaguely recalled him as a quiet, perpetually tired-looking man who worked in finance and seemed to fade into the wallpaper at family events. "Well," Tatum continued, a sly smile in her voice, "it turns out his firm is one of my biggest corporate clients. We have a great working relationship. I may have mentioned to him that I was catering a small private Christmas Eve event." "Tatum, what did you do?" "I just told him it was for my sister, who was having a tough holiday. He asked for the details. He seemed very interested. He said he'd be there." The implication hung in the air. Jose was abandoning his wife's grand debut to attend mine. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. My kindness, the very quality Gianna and Deborah had twisted into a weakness, was now my greatest asset. For 15 years, I had remembered birthdays, sent sympathy cards, and listened patiently to endless stories about gallbladder surgeries and ungrateful children. I had built a reservoir of goodwill, drop by drop, and now I was finally drawing from it. People weren't coming to my party just for me. They were coming because they were tired of Deborah's iron-fisted control and Gianna's desperate need for validation. The house, however, was still painfully bare. We'd bought a new tree, a lovely Fraser fir, but we had nothing to put on it. The emptiness was a constant glaring reminder of what had been taken. One evening, Sophia came downstairs, her 9-year-old face clouded with a sadness that broke my heart. "Mommy," she whispered, her lip trembling, "where's my sparkly angel, the one I made for the table?" I knelt and pulled her into a hug, my own throat tightening. "It's at Aunt Gianna's house right now, sweetie. She borrowed it." "But it's mine," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I want it back for our tree." I held her tight, stroking her hair. The rage I felt was so pure, so cold, it could have cut glass. This was their biggest miscalculation. They thought they were taking my things. They didn't realize they were stealing from my children. "You'll see it soon, baby," I promised, my voice fierce. "I promise." That night, after the kids were in bed, I took a single photo. I found a small snow globe I'd bought at a gift shop years ago, one they had missed. It depicted a tiny, peaceful house covered in snow. I placed it on the bare mantelpiece, the sole decoration in the entire room. I snapped a picture and posted it to my rarely used Instagram account. I didn't tag anyone. The caption was simple: "The real Christmas is coming home to us." Within an hour, it had been screenshotted and sent through the family grapevine. It was a declaration of intent, a warning shot. The message was clear: you can take the decorations, but you can't take the spirit. You can't take my home. My Instagram post landed like a well-aimed snowball. The fallout was immediate. Amy, my ever-reliable source of intel, started forwarding me texts. "Is Remy having people over on Christmas Eve too?" One cousin wrote to another. "Gianna's invite said 7 p.m., but Remy's just says evening. Maybe we can do both." The panic must have set in at Gianna's show home because my phone rang 2 days later. It was Deborah. "Remy," she said, her voice tight with forced pleasantry, "I'm hearing some confusing things. Are you having a little get-together on Christmas Eve?" "We're having a quiet evening at home," I replied, my tone placid. "Well, some of the family seem to think they're invited. It's causing a bit of a scheduling conflict with Gianna's party. You know, the family party." "I'm sure they'll figure it out," I said. And before she could reply, I added, "I have to go, Deborah. I'm baking," and hung up. The next confrontation was with Brian. He cornered me in the kitchen that night, his face a mixture of anger and desperation. The silent treatment was no longer working for him. "This has gone too far, Remy," he said, his voice low. "A rival party? You're trying to tear this family apart. My mother is beside herself." I slowly turned from the sink, wiping my hands on a dish towel. I let the silence stretch, watching him squirm. "I'm not the one who tore this family apart, Brian," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "You let them gut our home. You stood by, no, you helped them, while they packed up our children's memories. You forwarded our private financial documents to them after I asked you not to. You have the audacity to stand here and talk to me about family? This family stopped including me the second you decided your mother's schemes were more important than your wife's heart. So don't you dare talk to me about going too far." He flinched, the mention of the financial documents hitting its mark. He had no defense, and he knew it. He just stood there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish, before turning and walking away. The day before Christmas Eve, Amy and I were putting the final touches on the house. We hadn't bought new ornaments. Instead, we'd done something better. We made a trip to a local craft store and bought wooden beads, dried orange slices, and spools of velvet ribbon. Lance, who was quieter than usual but watched everything with an unnerving intensity, helped us string cranberries and popcorn. We made it our own. For a centerpiece, Amy had a brilliant idea. She'd collected the shards of a few cheap glass ornaments that had been broken in the attic and, using glue and glitter, transformed them into a sparkling, mosaic-like sculpture. It was beautiful, resurrected. Meanwhile, Gianna's social media was a train wreck of forced cheer. She posted a poll asking her followers if they preferred charades or a white elephant exchange. She posted a frantic-looking selfie with the caption, "So much to do! Being the hostess is a 24/7 job to worth it." It was all falling flat. She was trying to manufacture the magic I had spent 15 years cultivating organically. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. I was expecting a flower delivery from Tatum, but when I opened the door, there was no one there. On the porch was a small, brown cardboard box. My name wasn't on it. In messy, childish crayon, someone had written, "Sophia." My blood ran cold. I picked up the box. It was light. I took it inside, my hands trembling as I tore open the tape. Inside, nestled in a bed of crumpled tissue paper, was Sophia's glitter-bombed kindergarten angel. It was shattered into a dozen pieces. The cardboard wings were bent and torn. The clumsy, smiling face I loved so much was cracked down the middle. There was no note. There didn't need to be one. It was a message, delivered with the kind of casual cruelty that only true cowards possess. This wasn't just a warning anymore. This was a threat. I hid the broken angel before Sophia could see it. The rage that filled me was so absolute, so clarifying, it burned away any remaining shreds of doubt. They had crossed a line from which there was no return. Christmas Eve arrived, crisp and cold. While Gianna's house across town was likely a cavern of echoing anxiety, mine was a bubble of warmth and light. The scent of Tatum's beef Wellington and my neighbor's mulled wine filled the air. Soft music played. The house was full, not just with people, but with a palpable sense of camaraderie. Everyone who walked through the door gave me a look, a mixture of sympathy and defiant solidarity. I had made handwritten name cards for the buffet table. I'd set up a small table in the corner with craft supplies, and soon it was surrounded by the younger cousins, happily making their own ornaments to take home. It was everything Gianna's party wasn't: effortless, genuine, and joyful. After dinner, I gathered everyone in the living room. It was time for the reading of the family Christmas poem, a tradition my father-in-law Douglas usually performed with solemn duty. I had asked Lance if he would do the honors. My quiet, observant 13-year-old stood before the small crowd, his voice clear and steady as he read the familiar lines. He didn't falter once. When he finished, the room was silent for a moment before erupting in applause. I saw Douglas, who had surprisingly shown up alone, wipe a tear from his eye. Then Amy brought out a small, beautifully wrapped box. She handed it to Sophia. "We have one more ornament for the tree," she said gently. Sophia unwrapped it carefully. Inside, nestled on a bed of silk, was a new angel. It was made of glittering, hand-blown glass, almost identical in shape and size to the one she had made, but infinitely more beautiful. Her eyes widened. "It's so pretty," she breathed. I lifted her up, and she placed it on the highest branch she could reach. The broken angel was their move. This was mine. We would not be defined by their ugliness. We would create our own beauty. Later, as the party hummed around us, Tatum pulled me into the kitchen. Her face was grim. "I need to tell you something, Remy," she said, her voice low. I wasn't entirely honest about why I was so willing to help. She took a deep breath. "Last summer, I was in town for a consult, and I drove by your house just to see it. I was working up the nerve to call you. I saw Deborah's car in the driveway. I watched her walk out your front door and put something in her trunk. It was one of your Christmas storage bins, the one with the ceramic village pieces. I stared at her, my mind reeling. Last summer? But that's months ago, Tatum finished. This wasn't just a plan from 3 years ago, Remy. They've been actively taking things for a while. Planting the seeds wasn't enough. They were stealing the garden one plant at a time. The final devastating pieces clicked into place just as Jose, Gianna's husband, found me by the fireplace. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were clear for the first time I could remember. Remy, he said, his voice heavy, I owe you an apology. For years, I've just gone along. It was easier. He shook his head. I'm done with easy. I wanted you to hear it from me first. I'm separating from Gianna after the new year. I was stunned into silence. It's not just her obsession with appearances or this cruelty she's shown you, he continued, his gaze dropping to the floor. I found out she's been having an affair with a coworker for almost a year. He let out a hollow laugh. All this time, she's been accusing you of not being authentic, and she's been living a complete lie. Poetic justice. It was swift, brutal, and more complete than anything I could have engineered. Just before midnight, as the last of the guests were leaving, my phone buzzed. It was a group text from one of Brian's cousins, the one who had felt obligated to make an appearance at Gianna's. The text contained a single photo. It was a picture of Gianna's cavernous living room. My decorations were all there, perfectly lit, gleaming on the oversized tree and mantel. But the room was completely, utterly empty. There were no guests, no family, no joy, just a hollow, beautifully decorated tomb. Later that night, after everyone was gone and the house was quiet, I found Brian sitting on the living room couch. A packed suitcase sat on the floor beside him. He looked up at me, his face etched with defeat. He knew he had no place here anymore. I didn't say a word. I just walked to the entryway table and picked up a manila envelope. I placed it in his lap. He looked down at the documents inside, the bold heading clearly visible. Petition for dissolution of marriage. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. Merry Christmas, Brian, I said. Christmas morning dawned quiet and bright. For the first time in 15 years, I didn't wake up at 5 a.m. to put a turkey in the oven. I woke up when the sun hit my face. Downstairs, Lance and Sophia were already awake, but they weren't frantically tearing open gifts. They were sitting on the floor with Amy and Tatum, who had stayed the night, drinking hot chocolate and talking quietly. The gifts under our new, simply decorated tree weren't extravagant, but they were thoughtful. A first edition copy of Lance's favourite book, a real artist's easel for Sophia, a vintage bottle of wine for Amy, a framed photo of Tatum and me as kids, one I thought had been lost forever. There was a peace in the room that had been absent from our holidays for years, a peace that came from being surrounded only by people who genuinely loved us. My phone buzzed with a text from one of the younger Jensen cousins. Hey, just wanted to say thank you for last night. It felt like Christmas again. My parents are still mad, but my brother and I are with you. Let us know when we can see the kids. More messages like it trickled in throughout the day, small flags of allegiance from a family that was finally fracturing along its true fault lines. Late in the afternoon, a message from Deborah appeared on my screen. It was dripping with martyrdom. I hope you're happy. You didn't have to destroy the family. I looked at the message, feeling nothing but a profound sense of distance. I didn't reply with words. I walked into my living room where my children were laughing with their aunts and took a picture of the calm, happy scene. Then I sent her back the photo I'd taken weeks ago. My empty living room stripped bare. The before and after. My only comment. Later, Tatum and Amy helped me clean up. We gathered the last remnants of the cheap, store-bought garland I'd used to fill in some of the bare spots. We took it out to the backyard fire pit. "To new beginnings," Amy said, tossing a handful into the flames. It sizzled and vanished into smoke. "To knowing who your real family is," Tatum added, her arm around my shoulder. I didn't need to scream to get my revenge. I didn't need to beg for my possessions back or engage in a petty war of words. I learned that the most effective retaliation isn't loud. It's the quiet, strategic removal of your presence, your warmth, your light. They thought the decorations made Christmas. They didn't understand that I was the magic. I was the tradition. And when they took me for granted, the whole spectacle collapsed. You don't need to burn down someone else's house. Sometimes all it takes is building a better one next door, opening your windows, and letting the sound of your laughter drift over the fence. All it takes is silence, perfect timing, and a guest list. A few days after New Year's, a large moving truck pulled up to the house. Brian had arranged for movers to get the rest of his things. I stood at the window and watched as they loaded boxes. One of the movers came to the door holding a single, large storage bin. "Ma'am, the husband said to make sure you got this one." It was the last of the Christmas decorations. My grandfather's star was nestled right on top. I didn't feel a rush of victory or relief. I just felt tired. I directed the mover to put the bin in the garage. I'd deal with it later, maybe next year. Maybe never. That evening, after the kids were asleep, I went up to the attic. In a dusty corner, I found an old wooden crate I'd forgotten about. It was filled with my grandfather's woodworking tools and some scraps of wood from his barn, the same wood he'd used to make the first star. I brought a piece downstairs. It was weathered and gray, but the grain was strong. I sat at my kitchen table, a carving knife in my hand, and began to whittle. Slowly, a new shape began to emerge from the rough wood. It wasn't perfect. It was clumsy and splintery in places, but it was mine. Some things they can't steal. They only think they can.